Okay, one of the iconic DDB ads for Volkswagen, think small, very obviously legacied in this. There was an issue somehow with the upload. It actually wouldn't download. So what I did was I took a screenshot, but it kept jumping around. And so that's why the margin is sort of cut off and it's looking kind of funky. Couple of things here. This doesn't really balance this. There's a little bit too much line spacing here, and probably better to run it all against the left side, so have it justified or align left, because this kind of hangs out on its own. So here's the original ad, and it was an entire campaign, and we can see that there's a little more density within the lines. Even though it's kind of reading sentence by sentence, there's still a little more density and things seem a little more cohesive. What's going on here is based on the size of the type, proportionally, the leading, it just looks too spaced. There's too much negative between each line. And this could probably be a little larger. Obviously, in the original, we do have a 3-column. And then this is centered, the headline. So there's a lot of space here. And so this could be probably closed up a little bit. Like I said, the margin did get cut off when I did the screenshot. So there's a little more width over here and a little more width over here. Overall, the concept is really good because it is such a nod, a tribute to that campaign. It just seems like we need a little bit more balance and alignment between this text block and this text block, and not quite so much negative in here. I think having him lean in like this to the negative space works really well. And then he is kind of related to the column vertically. We've got a strong implied line pushing down here into this area, which is really nice. So overall, it's a very well done, clever ad. It's not clever for the sake of being clever. It's utilizing the iconic ads of the 60s. So I think we do have a little problem here that I will point out. This says July 6, 1969 at the Museum of Contemporary Art. And MoCA, I believe, was founded in 79. 80, somewhere around in there. It was not around in the 60s. So, just saying. I think also if this is a formal ad, if this is an actual tribute ad, having this dash, the little hyphen there instead of the M dash, it just doesn't work. The date line and the time could be finessed a little more. This should say 8 o'clock. The 69 is kind of interesting that you chose that rather than this being a tribute to advertising and DDB. This should be more current, more now rather than back in the 60s. Milton Glaser. Colors are really appropriate. The medial primaries, the red, green, blue, and then some yellow. We definitely get the clock idea. And I think the timeless could be worked out better. If time can wrap, maybe less can wrap as well, because they're not actually working together within the circle, and TIME is really too close to that center circle, and then less is backed off from it. So it would have been better to, if possible, make the word time and then less larger, but basically wrap them around. And maybe it's because it looks like you used some stencil, so maybe it was because of the size of the stencil, but I would have done this size rather than the smaller size. Generally, it's preferable to keep things in reality. So is this when he was born? Which I don't know what his birthday was, but this is kind of meaningless as to what this is all about. It's not a current date, and the 6, 7, 8, 9, not sure what that's trying to communicate either. And this is not the current MoCA logo. Given the body of work that he created over the span of his life and the things he was known for, the whole colored paper idea, the paper cutout idea, does have a strong affinity given the body of work that Glazer created. And it also has sort of a nod toward Matisse with his paper cutouts, which he did later in life. It's fairly well ordered. What I do think also, instead of kind of not slapping, that's really not the right word, but using mocha against the white, maybe instead of black, we actually went with white and did the letters in white with the colored dots. But again, that's not the actual Mocha logo. We'll go back here because that's the actual Mocha logo. Given the assignment specs, I think we're missing tagline and we're missing information about when this event might take place. There's an issue here with the way the A is kind of crowding the box, and I don't think also that Mocha would have approved that lockup with the black against the white. I don't think that they put their logo in a field color, in a background color like that. So be very careful when you're working with people's logos, what their brand guidelines are. Because there's certain things you can do with logos and certain things you can't do with logos. And I really strongly suspect that locking the Mocha logo up with a black rectangle like this, and this being where it is, not a real good idea, and probably not acceptable. So that's just a word to the wise for you. Moscoso, along with Wes Wilson, between the two of them, they were pretty much the psychedelic movement back in the late 60s. They took color theory and turned it on its side. They took all the principles of color theory, and the way they made the psychedelic art was to increase the saturation, use opposite hues at full saturation and similar value. And that's how we get the psychedelic effect of that kind of on acid poster effect. And it was also very much influenced by Art Nouveau. It pushed things in a different direction. It's kind of like what happened with New Wave design in the 70s and 80s when postmodernism really kicked in. There are certain pivotal movements, and even though the psychedelic movement was short, it had high impact. So this is sort of a cartoon nod to, I think, the woman with the sunglasses, the Moscoso work. It does have a very cartoony feel. This is actually not blended really well. This piece, this square here, is not really blended with the background. You kind of have the right idea of the undulation and the bright color and the lack of value contrast. So there's a lot of interesting things going on here. This is not the right type of typeface. This is not from that era. I think there are other typefaces, or even hand drawing the lettering. Did you draw this? Is this something that you illustrated? And why not take what you did here with the letter forms all squeezed like that and enveloped into here? Because this and this does not belong together. They do not fit. Another thing to consider with this is the all the boxes, all the kind of frame and why that's happening and what it's for, because a lot of it's not necessary and it's not really reflective of his work. His work was much more undulating and fluid, very curvilinear. And these little areas right here are kind of unfortunate because they indicate that this is a clip from something else. It's a patch, a swatch that was lifted from something else. Watch those details, because it's in the details that design becomes excellent, or it stays less than, let's just say that. So my goal for you would be toward excellence. And so leaving these little artifacts here and here, and how you're relating things. And we've got these up here and these here, and there's You just kind of have to refine and finish everything, resolve everything, and get used to looking for these little details, because good design, excellent design, is in the details. Murakami definitely has his own style. Kind of reminds me of Mr. Ling's cars. I don't know if I showed you guys that. You got to see this. There you go. He's a British car dealer. Sells used cars. This is his brand. This is what he does. But that's what Murakami reminds me of. Anyway, if you want to explore lingscars.com. Okay, I'm done. The concept here is great. He stands out because he's in this olive drab with all these kind of appliques of happy daisies, and he's got the shoes and the attitude and the stance and everything. And he's not taking it from anybody. Putting the date line is pretty cool back here, and that's kind of a nice idea. Everything is easy to read. I don't think you need the drop shadow. Drop shadows, we use them. They don't always help. Sometimes they cheapen things because they're kind of associated with Microsoft Word documents and tragic PowerPoint presentations. So be careful when you're using a drop shadow. If it's not necessary, don't use it, because you can make the type stand out against the gray without using a drop shadow. The drop shadow is appropriate right in here because we have a sense that there's a wall and something on the wall, and it's leaving a drop shadow. But that's really the only place you need it. You don't need it up in here because, again, it adds complication, not complexity. Complexity is good. Complication is confusing. And down here, we don't need it. You don't have it here on the lettering, and that's great. And he, of course, has a drop shadow for him because, he's standing in real space. But we don't need this here. We don't need the drop shadow behind the text here. Good idea. Totally makes sense. Focuses on him and surrounded by his creative work. And it's a good way to present the idea. Just a point of detail, I'd align the text box with the bottom of his shoe. You have to see the TED Talk. If you haven't looked at his TED Talk, I think it's one of his earlier ones where he's got the broken glasses, which is why the glasses are all akimbo here. This actually nails it. It looks like a book jacket. It looks like a book cover. And it just is kind of cool in how it quietly represents what Chip Kidd is all about. And this is a line that Michael Crichton, I think, who wrote Jurassic Park, sent back when he saw the cover design for the book. So picking up on that, and that it's a good solve to the problem. It's a really, again, like the Bill Bernbach ad that we saw first, it is a good nod, a good tribute to Chip Kidd, and I think Chip would really appreciate this if he saw it. Don't have any real issues. Should the I be here? Because obviously we're reading, we're reading his full last name in the drop. I'm just wondering, should we have his full name spelled out properly? I think your 3 words, powerful, elegant, timeless, definitely describe Vignelli. I think there's certain things that wouldn't work for him, and that is what's happening right in here, where the L is crossing the G. This would be a problem for him, I think. This might be a problem, and this might be a problem. So the overall idea, I think, is there. The way the circles fit within the space works, but where the type is fitting, if you remember the previous assignment where we were dealing with framing, this needs to be framed. So we need to place Massimo Vignelli within, basically frame that rather than overlap it. This is awkward in here, and that's very awkward right in there. This is really tangent to the circle here, and that big space. So this becomes part of the circle because the space is closed. Again, Gestalt principle of proximity. What is close together gets grouped together. That's the way human beings think. So that needs to be associated here. And if you're going to run it like this, then this could be in the middle, horizontally in the middle between these two. You've got this typography, and he used a lot of Helvetica. Needs more leading here because of this. In other words, line spacing vertically. This needs to go away so that these have a place to sit comfortably. This needs to be kind of resolved in its relationship to this because we're kind of reading this as a column. So the way this is situated and the way this is situated doesn't work. This is awkward, and as I said, this needs to be fixed. I would say get rid of that. This is not working either. There's just too many things. The way the circles are laid in, the type needs to be fitted around them. Or you fit the type and then lay in the circles. But right now they're fighting each other. And so there are some awkward moments. And again, it's that attention to detail that's going to be really important. If you want your design to be significant, if you want your design to be elegant, paying attention to the details is extremely important. And it does take some, it takes some experience to notice things, but you need to start noticing early. If we look at alignments, if we look at margins all the way around, there's a lot of unevenness, and things need to be really tightened up, especially given who this is about. So it would be really good if you understood the grid. Vignelli created the Unigrid. So he's very mid-century modern. He's very modern as opposed to postmodern. This has a lot more postmodern to it. So it doesn't really reflect his approach and mindset. Research and researching to understand is really important if we are representing something accurately with authenticity. And that was the point of this. This assignment kind of forces you to look at other designers that you may not be familiar with, and to understand their approach, because you have to make something that looks like them. One of the best ways to learn how to design is to copy other designers as part of your education. As illustrators, we draw, we copy from the masters, and we copy from contemporary people that we look up to. We deconstruct what they've done in order to learn and in order to assimilate. So this needed to actually be a little more studied to understand Vignelli's thing. If you read his design canon, it would be very appropriate to design based on his canon. In fact, if you haven't read it, I would strongly suggest that you all read it. I think it's available on Amazon. This actually looks more like a Paul Rand because of the colors used. There's some colors that Vignelli would not have used. Just the layout, the grid isn't working. Nothing's aligning to anything. Even the background circles, there's more space vertically than there is horizontally between the circles, and that would not have been a Vignelli thing. He was meticulous and very elegant. Truly consider the big picture for yourselves. As professional practitioners of design, you're going to want to create significant, highly valued work. And the only way you can do that is to really mind the details. You need to be a good designer. Master the craft, master the problem solving, master the process. Curate and learn from what you curate so that you can take hold of it, assimilate it, and make it your own and improve upon it. You deconstruct to reconstruct. So this assignment had you looking at some designers that you may not have been familiar with. and making some choices. And in order to represent their work without actually including their work, the idea was to study, because you had to study in order to solve this problem. You had to study what they were doing and delve into why. Bring that into your design process and your thinking, your problem solving. Murakami doesn't begin with a grid necessarily. He just kind of, pulls it out and goes. Very different. This is a postmodern designer, whereas Vignelli, very much a modern designer. Chip Kidd, postmodern, but with a lot of modern foundation. You can tell it in his work. Milton Glaser, illustrator, designer, thinker, teacher, mentor, still strongly influential and always will be as designers. Minimal, very modern, very elegant, concept-driven advertising. So be aware. Keep your eyes open. What do you see?